In the grand halls of the Zharan kingdom, Princess Lyra sat by her window, looking out at the shining stars above. Her royal robes shimmered in the moonlight, but her heart felt heavy. Every night, she gazed at the stars, wondering if she would ever find someone who truly cared for her, not because of her title, but because of who she was. The princess had always known that her fate was not like other royal women. The kingdom, rich with traditions and power, placed great value on alliances through marriage. But unlike her sisters, who were wooed by noble and powerful suitors, Lyra was often passed over. She had been told that it was because of her family's curse, a long-held belief that any man who married her would suffer great misfortune. She had no idea how the rumors had started, but the weight of them was unbearable. The Zharan kingdom was a place of wonders, with beautiful cities and thriving markets. Yet for all its grandeur, Lyra felt like an outcast in her own home. Every suitor who had come before her had turned away, some with polite excuses, others with cruel words. She had grown used to hearing the whispers behind her back, the mocking laughter as she entered the grand halls. But it still hurt. Her father, King Riven, was a wise and powerful ruler, but even he had no answer to the problem of finding his daughter a suitable husband. It was a matter of pride for the kingdom that the princess be married off to someone worthy of her, and yet every attempt had failed. Lyra knew her father cared for her deeply, but his frustration grew with each passing day. The king was becoming desperate. He had sent invitations to the most powerful and influential alien rulers in the galaxy, hoping that one would see beyond the stories and accept his daughter's hand. But the answers were always the same: no. The whispers in the royal court grew louder. The princess is cursed, they said. She brings nothing but bad luck. Lyra could hear their voices, soft but cutting, as they discussed her fate. Her mother, Queen Sarah, had passed away when she was just a little girl, and she had been raised by servants and advisors. Now, as she approached adulthood, her loneliness was more apparent than ever. Lyra had never asked for a perfect marriage. She didn't dream of a grand wedding or a life of luxury. She only wanted someone who would see her for who she was, a young woman with dreams and hopes, not a cursed royal who was a burden to her kingdom. But no one had ever looked at her that way. As she sat alone in her chamber, Lyra could feel the weight of the years pressing down on her. Her heart ached as she thought about her future. Would she be forever trapped in this gilded cage, a princess no one wanted? Would she ever find someone who could see beyond the rumors and love her for herself? With a sigh, she stood and walked to the balcony, her heart heavy, but her gaze still fixed on the stars. Maybe one day, someone would look at her and see more than just a title. She could only hope. The next morning, Princess Lyra wandered through the royal gardens, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. The scent of the blooming flowers was sweet, but it couldn't mask the emptiness she felt. She watched the birds flutter above, wishing she could be free like them, free to fly away from the weight of the kingdom's expectations. Lyra had grown up with the knowledge that her life was not her own. As the only heir to the throne, she had responsibilities she could never escape. But it wasn't the royal duties that saddened her. It was the constant reminder that no one ever truly saw her for who she was. The curse, the rumors, the whispers, they had become a part of her life, a shadow that followed her wherever she went. For years, Lyra had put on a brave face, hiding her true feelings behind the walls of the palace. She had always smiled, always played the part of the perfect princess. But inside, she was tired. Tired of the loneliness. Tired of pretending that everything was fine when her heart ached with every rejection. As she sat beneath the old oak tree, Lyra closed her eyes and let the warmth of the sun wash over her. It was there, in the quiet solitude of the garden, that she allowed herself to think of something she hadn't dared to before, someone who had briefly stepped into her life and made her heart race with the possibility of hope. Years ago, when she was just a child, a human ship captain had visited the Zharan kingdom on a diplomatic mission. His name was Captain Alexander, a man with striking blue eyes and an easy smile. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. while the other visitors had treated her like a mere princess, a title to be honored and respected. Alexander had looked at her with genuine curiosity, as though she were just another person to him. That brief encounter had stayed with her, buried deep in her heart. She could still remember the way he had spoken to her, not as a princess, but as a young woman with her own thoughts and dreams. It had been the first time someone had treated her like she mattered beyond her royal bloodline. That moment had given her a glimpse of something she had never known, a real connection. But time had passed, and she had never seen Alexander again. The memory of him had faded into the background, buried under the weight of her duties and the constant pressure to find a suitor. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was different, that he might be the one to see her for who she truly was. Lyra's heart swelled with longing, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in a long time. She had always feared that no one would ever choose her, that the curse would keep her locked in a life of solitude. But what if there was someone out there who didn't believe in the rumors? What if, just maybe, there was someone who would see past the curse and choose her anyway? As the wind rustled through the trees, Lyra made a quiet promise to herself. She wouldn't settle for a marriage of duty. She would wait for someone who truly saw her, not as a princess, but as the woman she longed to be. Days passed since Princess Lyra had allowed herself to dream of someone who could see her for who she truly was. The gentle winds of the Zeren kingdom had blown away the last of her doubt, replacing it with a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. But just as she started to allow herself to believe in the possibility of love, something unexpected happened. One morning, the kingdom buzzed with excitement as a human fleet arrived on the outskirts of the city. The news spread quickly. Captain Alexander had returned to the Zeren kingdom. Lyra's heart skipped a beat at the mention of his name. She had never forgotten him. The man who had treated her as an equal, who had seen her as more than just a princess. For a brief moment, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Was it possible that the man she had only met once was back? As the fleet's ships landed in the royal port, Lyra stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching the scene unfold below. The ships, sleek and shining under the sun, stood in stark contrast to the ancient stone walls of the palace. The humans who disembarked were unlike any of the alien visitors who had arrived before. There was something different about them. Captain Alexander stepped off the ship, his uniform crisp and well-fitted. His presence was commanding, yet he wore a calm expression. As he glanced up at the palace, his eyes briefly met Lyra's. She froze, her heart racing. In that brief moment, she could see the same warmth in his gaze that she had remembered from their first meeting. He smiled, just as he had years ago, and it felt like time had stopped. Lyra quickly turned away, her cheeks flushed with a mix of surprise and confusion. What was he doing here? The humans rarely visited the kingdom, and they certainly weren't part of the royal matchmaking process. The princess had spent years wondering if she would ever see him again, and now he was standing on her doorstep. The news that Captain Alexander had arrived was quickly brought to her father, King Riven. He had invited the human captain to discuss trade deals, an important matter for both kingdoms. The king, unaware of the connection between his daughter and the captain, was eager to make arrangements for a meeting. However, Lyra was not eager to sit in on the discussions. Instead, she retreated to the palace gardens, hoping for a moment of peace and clarity. Yet, she couldn't escape the feeling that something had changed. She couldn't shake the thought of Alexander standing before her, his smile just as she remembered it. As she walked beneath the trees, Lyra's mind raced. She had spent years convincing herself that her destiny was to marry a suitor who would never truly see her. But now, with Alexander's unexpected arrival, everything seemed uncertain. The princess took a deep breath, wondering if fate had brought him back for a reason. She had never allowed herself to hope, but now, for the first time, she wondered if her story could have a different ending. As the days passed after Captain Alexander's unexpected arrival, the atmosphere in the royal palace grew tense. Princess Lyra had been told of the upcoming royal challenge, a long-standing tradition where the male suitors, be they alien or human, would compete for the princess's hand in marriage. Though it was meant to bring a sense of order to the chaotic process of finding a suitable partner, Lyra felt a wave of dread at the thought of it. The challenge was not only an event of strength and skill, but also a demonstration of status. It was a test she knew she had no control over. Her father, King Riven, had insisted that Lyra needed to choose one of the powerful alien males to marry. The kingdom could no longer stand the whispers that surrounded her curse. For the sake of the royal family's reputation, it was imperative that she settle the matter. The royal advisors urged her to go along with it, and Lyra felt as though she was being forced into a decision she had no say in. But then, something unexpected happened. Lyra overheard her father speaking to his advisors about the participation of a human in the competition. Alexander had, by his own will, requested to be part of the challenge. Lyra's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She had not expected him to be interested in such a thing, especially when he was only in the kingdom for diplomatic purposes. The princess had never once thought that someone like Alexander, a man of honor and courage, would submit himself to the same trials as the alien suitors. Despite her mixed feelings about the challenge, Lyra could not help but admire his boldness. He wasn't bound by tradition, and his willingness to risk everything made her think differently about him. The other alien suitors were powerful and grand, with their impressive armor and towering statures. But Alexander, though human and seemingly outmatched, had a strength within him that no one could deny. The day of the competition arrived, and the entire kingdom gathered in the grand arena. The palace courtyard was filled with spectators, eager to see the trials unfold. Tall stone walls encircled the arena, and grand banners bearing the royal crest fluttered in the wind. Lyra, seated on a raised platform, looked out over the scene, her heart heavy. The challenge began with a test of physical strength. The alien males, with their imposing size and fierce power, took the lead. They lifted massive boulders, broke through solid barriers, and showed off their unyielding strength. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the arena. But Lyra watched closely, her gaze moving from one competitor to the next. There was something unsettling about the whole display. The men fought for power, for prestige, not for love. It was a cold, calculated display of who was strongest, not who was worthy. Then it was Alexander's turn. The human captain stood before the crowd, his posture calm but determined. He didn't have the size or strength of the others, but he had something they didn't, a fierce will and a mind that worked just as hard as his muscles. With each test, he proved himself not through brute force, but through ingenuity and resilience. He used his wits to solve problems the others struggled with, thinking outside the box and showing that intelligence could be just as valuable as physical strength. Lyra's heart began to race. She had never seen anyone approach the challenge like this before. Alexander wasn't here to prove his strength. He was here to prove that he could stand as her equal. And with each trial he completed, Lyra found herself growing more and more captivated by him. The challenge wasn't just about the competition anymore. It had become something far more meaningful, an opportunity to show that someone could see past the rumors and the curse. Someone could see her, not as a princess or a curse, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. The competition continued with a final grueling test, one that would determine who was truly worthy of Princess Lyra's hand. This final trial was set in the wildlands surrounding the kingdom, an unforgiving area where nature and danger intertwined. The participants would have to navigate through thick forests, cross fast-moving rivers, and face wild creatures that roamed the lands. The suitors would not only have to rely on their strength and skills, but also their courage and resourcefulness. As the competitors prepared for the trial, Lyra sat on a raised platform overlooking the vast expanse of the wildlands. The air was thick with tension. She watched the suitors gather, their armor gleaming under the sun, their faces set in determination. The alien males stood proud, towering over the human competitors. They were confident, strong, and unafraid. But as Lyra looked out across the field, Her eyes were drawn to one person, Captain Alexander. He stood at the edge of the group, looking calm but focused. Unlike the others, he wore no heavy armor. His clothes were simple, practical, designed for mobility rather than spectacle. He didn't look like someone who was out to impress the crowds or make a grand show. He looked like someone who was ready to take on the challenge, not for glory, but for something far deeper. The moment the signal was given, the suitors rushed into the wildlands, eager to prove themselves. The alien males moved quickly, relying on their sheer strength to tackle obstacles, while Alexander took his time, carefully considering his every move. He knew that this trial was more than just a test of physical endurance. It was a test of heart. As the participants made their way deeper into the wildlands, Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the alien suitors charging ahead, their brute force enough to push through the thick underbrush. But then she saw Alexander. He was moving slower, cautiously, making sure to avoid the quicksand pits and dangerous creatures that lurked in the shadows. He wasn't rushing to the finish line. Instead, he was carefully observing, using his mind to anticipate the risks ahead. It didn't take long for the others to run into trouble. One by one, the alien suitors began to struggle. One got caught in a thorn bush, another was nearly swept away by a sudden flash flood. They were powerful, but the wildlands weren't a place where strength alone would guarantee survival. Lyra watched, her concern growing. But it was Alexander who surprised everyone. When a large beast, its eyes glowing red with hunger, appeared from the underbrush and lunged at the competitors, it was Alexander who took the lead. With a steady hand, he calmly assessed the situation. Instead of attacking the beast head-on, he used his surroundings. Pulling a vine from a tree, he swung it around the creature's neck, trapping it long enough for the others to escape. His quick thinking and bravery saved the group. As the last of the suitors made it through the wildlands, Lyra found herself holding her breath. Alexander was the last to arrive. His clothes torn, his face covered in dirt, but his eyes were clear, and there was a calmness about him that none of the others possessed. He had done it, not just for victory, but because he believed in the challenge. He had shown not only courage but heart. As Lyra watched him approach, she knew that this was not just another trial. This was the moment that had changed everything. For the first time, she saw a man who had treated her like an equal, who had shown her what true courage and determination looked like. She knew, in that moment, that Alexander wasn't just here to win the competition. He was here for her, and he had proven himself worthy of her trust, her respect, and maybe even her heart. As the days passed after the final trial, Princess Lyra found herself unable to stop thinking about Captain Alexander. She watched him from afar as he continued to impress the kingdom with his wit and courage. Despite his humble appearance and simple demeanor, there was something about him that set him apart from all the other suitors. He didn't just compete to win. He competed to prove something deeper, that he was more than just a man from a distant world. He was someone who truly cared for her. Lyra's heart grew heavier as her thoughts swirled. She had never allowed herself to feel this way before, especially not toward someone from another world. For so long, she had convinced herself that she would have to marry one of the powerful alien suitors to fulfill her royal duty. But now, as she saw Alexander's actions and his kind spirit, she realized that perhaps her heart wasn't meant to follow tradition. One evening, after the day's trials had ended, Lyra found herself alone in the palace garden, seeking the moment of peace. The setting sun cast long shadows over the lush greenery, and the air was warm and quiet. She sat beneath the large oak tree that had always been her refuge, the one place where she could let her guard down and think clearly. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to find Alexander standing before her. His face was tired but calm, and there was a sincerity in his eyes that made her heart race. He had come to speak with her. "Princess," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of emotion, "I wanted to speak with you, alone." Lyra swallowed nervously but nodded, gesturing for him to sit beside her. She was surprised by how natural it felt to be in his presence, how easy it was to let her guard fall when he was near. "I know the challenge isn't over yet, but I've made my intentions clear," Alexander continued, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm here not because I want to win your hand for the glory of it. I'm here because I want to understand you. I want to see you for who you are, not just the princess everyone expects you to be." His words sent a warm rush through her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Everyone had always seen her as a princess, a royal bloodline to be married off for the good of the kingdom. But Alexander wasn't interested in her title. He was interested in her. Lyra took a deep breath, gathering the courage to reveal something she had kept hidden for so long. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. "There's something you should know," she began, her voice trembling. "Something no one ever tells you when you grow up as a princess." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not just a princess. I'm the daughter of a cursed bloodline. The rumors you've heard, they're true. Any man who marries me is said to bring misfortune upon himself. That's why no one has ever wanted me." Alexander listened intently, his expression serious but gentle. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to reassure her with empty words. He just listened, as though he was trying to understand the weight she carried. Lyra continued, "For years, I've wondered if I'll ever be loved for who I am, not for the crown I wear. But I've been too afraid to hope, too afraid to let someone see me as more than just a princess." She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But you make me want to believe. You make me want to believe that I can be loved for who I am, not just for the title I carry." For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Then, Alexander reached out and gently took her hand in his. His touch was warm, comforting, and his voice was soft but firm when he spoke. "You are more than just a princess to me, Lyra. I see you, everything that you are. I don't care about the curse. I care about you." Tears welled in Lyra's eyes as the weight she had carried for so long finally began to lift. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a burden. For the first time, she felt like someone truly saw her. In that quiet moment, under the shade of the oak tree, Lyra knew that her heart had found something worth fighting for. And perhaps, just perhaps, the love she had longed for all her life wasn't as far out of reach as she had once believed. The day of the final trial had arrived. Princess Lyra stood at the edge of the royal platform, looking out over the grand arena where the last test of the competition would take place. This was the most dangerous trial yet, one that would test the competitors' survival skills in the wildest and most unpredictable part of the kingdom. The trial would take them through thick forests, over raging rivers, and through the very heart of nature's fury. Lyra's heart beat faster as she watched the competitors assemble. There were only a few left now, the strongest and most determined suitors. The alien males, with their towering figures and battle-hardened armor, were ready to face the challenge head-on. Then there was Alexander. Unlike the others, he wore no heavy armor, his clothes simple and practical. He was human, weaker in strength compared to the others, but there was something about his calm confidence that set him apart. Lyra's eyes followed him as he took his place alongside the others, his gaze steady, his posture relaxed. The competition was meant to show who could endure the harshest of trials, who could survive when pushed to the limit. The participants would have to cross a series of treacherous obstacles, raging rivers, thick forests filled with dangerous creatures, and steep cliffs that required skill and strength to navigate. Only those who reached the final point, in one piece, would be deemed worthy of the princess's hand. As the signal was given to begin, the suitors surged forward, eager to prove themselves. The alien males raced ahead with powerful strides, using their strength to push through the dense forest. The sounds of their heavy footsteps echoed through the trees, while the human captain, Alexander, moved more cautiously. He didn't rush, but instead took measured steps, carefully assessing each move before he made it. Lyra watched him closely, admiring how he approached the trial. While the others relied on their strength, Alexander relied on his intellect and patience. It wasn't long before the first challenge arrived, a deep, fast-moving river that had to be crossed. The alien suitors, with their muscular bills, tried to brute force their way across, but the strong current pushed them back. Some stumbled and nearly lost their footing, their heavy armor weighing them down. But Alexander, he found a narrow, safer path along the edge of the river, using fallen trees to create a makeshift bridge. He crossed with ease, his movements swift and sure, never rushing but always moving forward. The second challenge came swiftly, a dense, dark forest filled with wild creatures. Lyra's heart raced as the suitors entered the trees, their silhouettes disappearing into the shadows. The alien males used their strength to hack through the underbrush, making noise as they charged ahead. But soon, they found themselves surrounded. From the shadows, fierce creatures with glowing eyes began to stalk them, their claws sharp and deadly. But Alexander, calm and quiet, didn't panic. He took a deep breath, listening to the sounds of the forest. He didn't rush into the chaos like the others. Instead, he moved slowly, watching his surroundings carefully. When a creature lunged at him, he ducked and used his surroundings to trap it, carefully avoiding the others, and in the end, he successfully made it through unharmed. Lyra's heart swelled with pride. Alexander wasn't the strongest, but his wisdom, courage, and calmness under pressure had carried him through. While the others had been caught up in the frenzy, Alexander had remained focused, thinking through every step. By the time the final obstacle approached, Lyra knew that Alexander had proven something the others hadn't. True strength wasn't just about power. It was about heart, intelligence, and bravery. As he crossed the last of the challenges, the crowd erupted in applause. The alien males had stumbled, while Alexander had walked through the trials with purpose and determination. Lyra looked at him as he stood at the finish line, his face tired but victorious. She could see the quiet pride in his eyes, the same pride that came from knowing he had done more than just survive. He had earned his place by her side. The final trial had ended, and the competitors, now exhausted, gathered in the royal courtyard to await the decision. Lyra sat on her throne, her gaze shifting between the men who had fought so hard to win her hand. The alien suitors were proud, their chests puffed out in expectation, certain that they had earned the right to claim her as their bride. But Lyra's heart was not with them. It had never been with them. It was with Alexander, the human who had stood out from the rest, the one who had used his mind and bravery to face each challenge. His courage had shone through when others relied solely on strength. The princess could feel the connection between them, something deeper than the mere competition. She knew he was the one who truly saw her. But as the royal council began to speak, a sense of unease settled over the room. There were murmurs in the air, voices whispering amongst themselves. Lyra noticed that one of the alien suitors, a tall and broad-shouldered warrior named Varn, was glaring at Alexander with a burning intensity. Varn had been one of the strongest contenders, and he had clearly expected to win. His pride, now bruised, was showing. "Your Majesty," Varn's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs. "I've proven my strength and my loyalty to the kingdom. Surely you cannot consider allowing a human, a mere outsider, to claim the honor of marrying your daughter." The room fell silent. Varn's words stung the air, but Lyra remained calm. She had expected this. She had known that there would be opposition, especially from those who still believed in old traditions. But the fire in her heart burned brighter. She had never been a part of the kingdom's old ways, and she would not be ruled by them now. Varn stepped forward, his expression full of arrogance. "I refuse to accept that this human should win. He is no match for me. If you truly wish to save your kingdom's reputation, then you must make the right choice. The right choice is me." Lyra's heart clenched, but she held her ground. She had heard enough. "Varn, I do not need to choose you for the good of the kingdom. I will choose the man who has shown me what true strength is. And that man is Alexander." Varn's face twisted with fury. He turned to the other suitors, seeking support, but the other men, though proud and strong, remained silent. They saw the truth in Lyra's words. They knew that this competition had been more than just a display of power. Alexander had earned his place by proving himself in a way none of them had. Varn, however, was not willing to accept defeat so easily. His anger boiled over, and in a flash, he made his move. With a snarl, he lunged at Alexander, aiming to strike him down before anyone could stop him. But Alexander was ready. Without hesitation, he sidestepped the attack and grabbed Varn's arm, twisting it behind his back. The warrior struggled, but Alexander's grip was firm. The crowd gasped, and for a moment, there was stunned silence. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not look away. She saw the courage in Alexander's eyes, the calmness in his movements. He wasn't fighting to win a prize. He was fighting to protect what mattered most. Enough. Lyra's voice rang out, loud and firm. This is not how we settle things. I have made my choice. She turned her gaze to Alexander, who released Varn, and stepped back, his expression one of quiet determination. Lyra stood, walking toward him. I choose you, Alexander, not because you are human, but because you are the only one who truly understands what it means to be strong. The crowd erupted in applause, and Alexander's eyes softened as he looked at her. In that moment, it wasn't about the competition anymore. It was about the future they could build together. The announcement of Princess Lyra's choice echoed through the royal hall, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The air was thick with tension as the suitors stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. Lyra had chosen Alexander, the human, over them all. It was unheard of. A human. To be the future consort of a Sharon princess, the idea felt impossible to many, even in a kingdom as vast and diverse as theirs. King Riven, who had watched the competition with the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders, stood still for a long moment. His face, usually composed, was now shadowed with uncertainty. He had wanted his daughter to find a worthy partner, someone strong enough to help rule their people. Yet, here she was, standing beside a man who was not of their world. The decision had shaken him to his core. Lyra stood firm, her chin lifted in defiance. She had made her choice, and nothing could change it. She glanced at Alexander, whose calm gaze met hers with warmth and understanding. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was trapped by duty or tradition. She was free, and it was a feeling unlike anything she had known before. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, some voices filled with shock, others with anger. The royal advisors exchanged looks, their faces clouded with concern. They had always believed that the marriage of the princess would secure the kingdom's future, that an alliance with a powerful suitor would strengthen their position in the galaxy. But now, that vision seemed to crumble before their eyes. One of the advisors, an older alien named Dorek, stepped forward, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and authority. Your Majesty, surely you understand the consequences of this choice. A human cannot rule beside a Sharon princess. The people will never accept it. The Empire will see us as weak. King Riven's gaze shifted to Dorek, then to the others who stood in agreement. There was truth in their words, he knew. His people had long held to their traditions. They had never thought to look beyond their own kind when choosing leaders or allies. A human, no matter how capable, could not be expected to change centuries of custom. But Lyra did not flinch. I don't need an empire to tell me who I should love or who I should marry, she said, her voice unwavering. I choose who I believe is right for me, not who is right for the kingdom. Alexander has shown me more courage and kindness than anyone ever has. He understands me. A few of the advisors, still unconvinced, exchanged looks of disbelief. They had never expected this outcome. The royal court was filled with high-ranking officials, soldiers, and dignitaries, all accustomed to following tradition without question. The idea of a human joining the royal family, let alone ruling beside their princess, was something that rattled them to their very core. King Riven looked at his daughter, his expression torn. He loved her dearly and wanted her happiness, but he also knew the weight of the decision she had made. "Lyra," he said, his voice soft but firm, "this is not just about you. The kingdom must be prepared for this change. If you truly want this, there will be many challenges ahead. The people may never accept it." Lyra nodded, her heart resolute. "I understand, Father, but I am ready to face them. With Alexander by my side, we can show the kingdom that there is more to strength than tradition. We can build a future based on love, respect, and unity, not fear." As she spoke, Alexander stepped forward, standing tall beside her. He looked at the king, his gaze unwavering but respectful. "I promise you, King Riven, I will protect and respect your daughter. Together, we will face whatever challenges come our way." For the first time, the king's expression softened. He didn't say a word, but in his eyes, Lyra could see a glimmer of acceptance. It wasn't the agreement of the whole kingdom yet, but it was a start. As the royal court slowly came to terms with the decision, Lyra and Alexander stood together, their hands clasped. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but it was a road they were ready to walk together.